Popcorn. Popcorn is simply a special variety of corn. It's one of the few foods people actually watch while it's being cooked. You'd think any corn kernel would do the same thing if you just heated it enough. It won't. Because unlike ordinary corn, popcorn has an unusually hard outer shell. Inside every popcorn kernel, there's a tiny drop of water trapped inside the starch. As the kernel gets hotter, the water slowly turns into steam. The pressure keeps building, but the shell is strong enough to keep almost all of it trapped inside. Eventually, the pressure becomes too great. The shell suddenly breaks apart, and the soft starch inside bursts outward, expanding almost instantly into the fluffy popcorn we recognize. The heat wasn't what made popcorn different. The kernel already was. Cornflakes. Cornflakes are one of the most common breakfast foods in the world, but if the word corn wasn't printed on the box, most people probably wouldn't even realize they're made from corn. They don't look like corn, they don't feel like corn, and they definitely don't taste like biting into a raw corn kernel. So how do you get from one to the other? The first problem is that raw corn is just too hard to flatten. If they tried flattening them straight away, they'd simply crack into pieces. So the kernels are slowly cooked with water, sugar, salt, and a little malt flavoring. The heat softens the hard starch inside, making each kernel flexible enough to flatten instead of break. Only then do giant steel rollers press every kernel into a thin flake. For the first time, it actually starts looking like breakfast cereal. At this point, they still aren't crunchy. The flakes are sent through giant ovens where most of their moisture is removed. As they dry, they become light, crisp, and unmistakably cornflakes. By the time they're packed into a box, it's hard to believe they were ever ordinary corn kernels. Cornstarch. Open almost any kitchen cupboard, and there's a good chance this white powder is already inside. It's used to thicken soups, make sauces silky, and even help crispy foods stay crispy. But nothing about it even looks like corn. It's just a soft white powder. It almost seems like factories simply grind dried corn into a fine powder. They don't. The trick is to separate the starch. The kernels spend hours soaking in warm water. As they soften, the kernel slowly starts coming apart. Machines then separate the tough outer skin, the tiny germ, and the fiber. What's left behind is the part the kernel has been storing all along, the starch. That starch is washed several times until it becomes a smooth white paste. The water is removed, the starch is dried, and finally ground into the fine powder we know as cornstarch. That's all it ever was. Corn syrup. There's a good chance you've already eaten corn syrup today without even realizing it. It's found in soft drinks, candy, ice cream, bread, and even foods that don't taste especially sweet. Which sounds a little confusing because the corn used to make it isn't actually very sweet. The interesting part is, what factories are really after isn't the sweetness. It's the starch hiding inside the corn. Think of that starch like a long chain made from thousands of tiny sugar pieces, all linked together. Special natural enzymes are added, and they slowly cut those long chains into much smaller sugars. Little by little, more of the starch breaks apart, and the thick white mixture becomes sweeter. It's then filtered, purified, and concentrated until it becomes the clear, sticky syrup used in thousands of foods around the world. Corn syrup isn't made by adding sugar to corn. It's made by unlocking the sugar that was already hiding inside the starch. Corn oil. You've probably cooked with corn oil without ever thinking about how it came from corn. I mean, a corn kernel doesn't look oily at all. Nothing about it suggests it could produce cooking oil that's used for frying, baking, and hundreds of packaged foods. The secret is hiding somewhere most people never notice. Almost all of the oil is stored inside one tiny part of the kernel, called the germ. The germ is the part of the corn that would one day grow into a new plant. To help it survive, it stores a small supply of natural oil as energy. The germ is separated from the rest of the kernel, then crushed to squeeze out the natural oil inside it. The oil is filtered and refined until it becomes the clear cooking oil found on supermarket shelves. And even after the oil is gone, the remaining germ isn't thrown away either. It's commonly used to make animal feed and other food ingredients. Bioplastic. If someone handed you a plastic fork, corn would probably be the last thing you'd guess it was made from. Plastic feels like something that belongs in a factory, not on a farm. Yet some plastics really are made from corn. The secret isn't the plastic, it's the starch inside the corn. That starch is separated from the rest of the kernel. Then it's mixed with helpful microbes that slowly change it into an entirely new material. That material is cleaned, melted, and shaped into things like cups, food containers, packaging, and even disposable cutlery. From the outside, the plastic may look the same, but where it came from couldn't be more different. Ethanol fuel. Most people think fuel only comes from oil. Gas stations certainly make it look that way. So seeing fuel made from corn sounds a little strange. But in some parts of the world, it's already mixed into the fuel people use every day. The real transformation happens much earlier. The corn is first ground into a fine meal, then it's mixed with water and natural enzymes. Those enzymes slowly unlock the starch, turning it into simple sugars. Yeast is added to eat those sugars and produce alcohol. It's the very same process that makes bread rise. The alcohol is then heated, separated, and purified until it becomes ethanol fuel. Most of it is blended with gasoline before ending up at fuel stations. Tortilla. If you've ever eaten a taco or wrapped a burrito, you've already eaten one of corn's oldest products. A tortilla doesn't look unusual. It's just a thin, soft, round piece of bread. But making one from corn isn't nearly as simple as grinding the kernels into flour. If you tried, the dough would simply fall apart. So what changes? People figured it out thousands of years ago. Instead of grinding the corn straight away, they first cook it in water mixed with a little lime. Then the corn is left soaking for several hours. During that time, the kernels soften, the outer skin loosens, and the corn becomes much easier to grind into dough. The softened kernels are washed, ground into a smooth dough called masa, then pressed into thin circles. A few moments on a hot surface, and the dough becomes the tortillas eaten around the world. Without that simple lime water treatment, corn tortillas wouldn't hold together the way they do. Corn chips. A corn chip doesn't begin as a chip. In fact, it doesn't even begin as dough. If you crushed ordinary corn and tried making chips with it, the result wouldn't taste the same. So something important has to happen long before it ever becomes a chip. They go through almost the same process as tortillas. The dough is rolled into thin sheets, cut into small triangles, and baked or fried until the moisture disappears. As they crisp up, they become the crunchy corn chips found in supermarkets around the world. Whether it's plain, cheesy, or spicy, every corn chip begins exactly the same way. Corn flour. Corn flour looks almost identical to cornstarch. They're both fine powder, and they're often sitting on the same supermarket shelf. It's easy to think they're exactly the same thing, just packaged under different names. They're not, because it all comes down to what stays inside the kernel. For cornstarch, almost everything inside the kernel is removed until only the starch remains. Corn flour takes a different path. Instead of separating everything, most of the kernel is dried, then ground into an extremely fine powder. That means much more of the corn stays together. That's why corn flour still tastes like corn, while cornstarch barely tastes like anything at all.